And the first agenda item is approval of the minutes of December 15th, 2021. Are there any additions or corrections of the minutes of December?
And Madam Chair, obviously, I did get some input from some members, so certainly welcome any additional input, but we'll make the edits suggested, for the final minutes, if you will.
Okay, all right.
Certainly welcome any, if anyone else has an input about the minutes, this is the time to make it before we vote on it, but we'll make some edits that were suggested already.
Okay, so my suggestion is, why don't we make those additional, whatever additions or corrections we have, and we'll just take a final look at them before we'll vote on both of the this meeting minutes and the December meetings together.
Okay.
So more formal, so we have a final draft to vote on at the next meeting. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so next we have a report of the executive director and the chair. Vandra, why don't you go first? And I don't have really that much to say, so why don't you?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. As I screen through the attendees to see if the guests have arrived, I'm actually texting one of them. I see him, Danielson Tavares. I'm texting him now, so I got to be a little distracted. But I won't have a lot of remarks in the beginning, as well. But there's a few things that I wanted to cover. Obviously, want to welcome everyone here. This is, as you said, Madam Chair, the first meeting of the new year, 2022, and it's January 19th. And this is an official public meeting of the commission. We were supposed to have a meeting, as you know, tomorrow, but we move it to today. So perhaps I want to note that perhaps we should reconsider, or just have one or two conversations later in the day about the meeting date. Does it work? Does the third Thursday of a month work? Do we go to the last Thursday? Do we go to Wednesday? So I wanted to sort of flag that for you. And I will make a couple announcements. Let me check again in the guests. You may know this already, but we have the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet has a new chief. Her name is Mariangeli Solis Severa. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a couple of times already, and with the cabinet, and we welcome her. I think perhaps next meeting she can come in and introduce herself and have a conversation with the commission. So I would like to again address that and confirm that I can send an invite to her. And the other thing too that I want to flag for the commission or commissioners is that the staff, except for me, have been working from home over the past 2 weeks, and we'll be going essentially this whole month, at least due to COVID-19. As you know, the current variant has taken, it looks like, at least I read it earlier, that's starting to decline, but it's been certainly picked up over the last couple of weeks. So that's the other thing that I want to sort of flag for you all. And obviously, the agenda is not packed, but it's substantive in terms of what we want to cover today. And in that note, we do have two guests, or both here. And the second portion of the agenda, if you will, Madam Chair, and I can start in that space if you don't mind. It's talking about the initiatives, and I kind of wanted to talk about them each, and start with the guests that we do have here. But I will make a brief note about one of the initiatives. Obviously, during last month's meeting, there was some unfortunate confusion and miscommunication regarding the Beyond the Pride initiative. And I'm currently having discussions with the staff, and certainly, to be honest, with the new administration about that initiative and what they intend to do in that space, if you will, overall. And rather not discuss that initiative today. But beyond that, and certainly the commissioners and others can can talk to me offline about this. But beyond that, Madam Chair, as I said, I'd rather sort of just go. We have Danielson Tavares, who's here to talk to us about, particularly the issue, not an issue, the initiative related to the BPD Reform Task Force. And then we have Will and Noha, and I can do a more, sort of thorough introductions of them in the topic, but I kind of wanted to go start there with them, get them, have a discussion with each of them, and then sort of dive into the other, initiatives, including the letters that we have drafted for Digital Divide, and certainly the letter that Commissioner Ann Russo suggested. But I wanted to sort of really start with, particularly with BPD Reform Task Force, talk about, obviously I sent a letter a couple of days ago. I know perhaps you had the chance to look at it. If not, sort of have a brief discussion about it, get some input, have Donnie sort of, I think, highlight some things that can help us in that space, and then move on to the next one in housing with Will Noha from the Fair Housing Commission. Then we'll go into the other 2 or 3 spaces. That's sort of how I thought this could work.
All right, so let me just stop
Sure.
for a minute. So we'll discuss the initiatives with the letters, is what you're suggesting.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I'll update on the broadband thing as we talk about the letter.
Correct.
And I actually talked to the mayor today. She actually
Okay.
told me about something else, so I can update where she is on that. And so we'll just put those together, the letter and an update on broadband together. Just 2 things about the meeting last week. I think we want to say that there is no recommendation from the Human Rights Commission on establishment of LGBTQ office. We haven't made any recommendation. And I want to say one other thing about last week is that, I say that the people around this table, both the commissioners and the staff, are people of good faith who have had a long-term commitment to human rights and civil rights. And I think there has to be an assumption of good faith on everybody's part. And I think whatever disagreements there are, I think there's just an assumption that these are good people trying to do good things. And I think all of us have that assumption. And if we may disagree about some things, but people have worked very hard. And I think all of us agree that the staff have worked very hard and done good work. And there may have been some confusion about how it happened and where it happened. But people have to assume good faith that people are trying to figure things out. And that in the end, some of us have spent decades on this work, and some of us have spent years on this work, but we're all trying to get to the same place. And we want to do it together and find a partnership to do it together. So I think we all need to keep that in mind. And I think that we as commissioners appreciate what people are trying to do and trying to work together to figure it out. Just as we are on these initiatives. So which one do you want to start with here?
I'll start with, thank you again for those remarks. And I'll start with the BPD Reform Task Force, which obviously is an initiative and matter that we've been over a year focusing on. It's the last bit of thing that happened is during the last meeting, we discussed when Lilo presented on this final report, including which included some data that we were looking from BPD, looking at that letter, his report, we drafted a letter requesting that information from BPD. And as you may remember, during the last month's meeting, while we were discussing this issue, then Chief Selena Barros-Miller was present with us and suggested, mentioned Don Nelson Tavares, who's the Chief Diversity Officer for the city. Well, actually sits his office next to mine in City Hall, and his office is part of the cabinet as well. That he had been working closely with BPD, with the Cadet Program in particular, and from there, I obviously after last meeting, I met with him a couple of times and expressed about some of the data that we're looking for. particularly what the letter says. And, based on his sort of remarks and thoughts, I thought perhaps he can come in and help us understand a little bit about some of the data and facts around specifically the cadet program. And I also thought that he had some very good insight related to sort of like the certification process, right? Language certification process. That was another way in which sort of BPD can hire individuals that essentially you sort of bypass, if you will, the service exam, which, if I'm incorrect, you can tell me, Donnie, but, at this point, I certainly want to, and I think, ideally, he can give us a little background of his job and what he's doing in this space, and certainly engage the commission and answer some questions, and we can follow up. But I think his office can certainly be a partner going forward in this work, because he's dealing with the BPD on a regular basis in this space. And after he talks and answer hopefully some questions, I also want to give a brief update relating to a meeting I had with the current executive director of the OPAT office, which we all know is the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency. I had a meeting with Attorney Stephanie Everett this morning. So, and then again, as I said, we'll discuss housing discrimination with Anoha. So perhaps we'll have 10 minutes also with Donnie. So Donnie, I see that you're here, so feel free to take it away. Thank you again for coming, bro.
Thanks for having me, Evandro. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think this might be easier if I just kind of do a brief introduction and then open it up for questions to kind of guide the dialogue a little bit. And so in my role as Chief Diversity Officer, I work with all city departments to try to help diversify the city workforce. When we took over, about 37% of our workforce were identified as people of color. And for us, obviously that number wasn't good enough, thinking about where sort of the city is in terms of representation. So I've been working with department heads over the years to get those numbers up, particularly the Boston Police and the Boston Fire Department. These are two departments that have unique challenges, right? When we look at officers, we don't have the ability to say, hey, we want to diversify, so we're looking for, X, whatever percentage you want to put on it. We follow the civil service guidelines, which calls for veterans preference. And what that means, if you're a veteran that applies to either the Boston Police or Boston Fire Department, you get absolute preference for being a veteran, which means, civilian scores 100 on the, let's say a civilian scores a 90 and a veteran gets a passing grade, that veteran automatically bumps that civilian on the list. And if you think about why that could potentially be an issue, if you consider what the veteran pool looks like in the Northeast, and if you ever request HRD data to say, hey, send us the applicant pool list of which we are considering on the veterans list, there is not much diversity there. And so you will have to allow that list to trickle down before you get to civilians, which for diversity's sake creates a lot of issues for us. So there are tools we've used to sort of help in this regard. One tool is the Cadet Program. The Cadet Program calls for Boston residents between 18 to 24 years old to apply. And after 2 years of service, they get a preference that's equatable to the veteran's preference. So it's another tool for us to get kids onto the force. We're on our 4th cadet class now. About 60% of those kids have been kids of color. We've had classes where we've been able to put on 50% women, which is remarkable. And in other tools we've used, is Evandro alluded to this a little bit, is what's called the language certification process, which is a tool that our public safety agencies can petition the state to say, hey, we're looking for, officers. We have to demonstrate the need, but we're looking for officers who speak a second language because, it's the constituency we deal with. And we've been doing more of that. And just kind of a little side note, we are replicating, and we got state approval for this last year, but we're replicating the Cadet Program in the Boston Fire Department. And we've also lately been using the language certification exams, which have led to our most diverse classes in the last 10 years, right? And that's due to the language certification process. So just happy to open up to any questions that you all may have, and we'll take it from there.
Reyes, go ahead, Reyes.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tavares. Why is this information not public? Why couldn't we find information regarding attrition in the cadet programs? Why could we not find any information regarding language proficiency? It is confusing that you have this information, but the information does not seem to be public.
Yeah, I definitely think we have to do a better job of getting that out there, right? And I think, to be honest, there seems to be like this political tug of war, right? Largely around the veterans conversation, which I think is the biggest issue. And so I think that's, that lends to some of the reasoning. But I do think, I'm not sure if we put in data requests through Boston Police and Boston Fire, but these are initiatives they've been highlighting lately, right? So I'm not sure that's a good answer, but yeah, I mean, that's stuff we should be embracing because, it's really made a difference for us.
So Reyes, are you talking about the cadet program in particular? So can we get information about the cadet program, the cohorts that have gone through in terms both intake and attrition rates?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So one thing I can provide immediately, and I'll send this over to Evandro, is the list of all of our cadets. Now, what I'd have to follow up with Boston Police is the attrition. How many kids are still on the force, or so that's the information we'd have to double back on.
So what I would say is, which is really important and helpful, and I appreciate your coming to us, it's helpful, is who entered the program, who finished the program, who entered the police force, and who's still there, or how long they were actually on active duty. So those points by race and gender.
Yeah, and I think it's important to hear directly from BPD, because just on that one point, one thing to consider is, and I've seen this over the years, the kids who apply to the cadet program, I find, are kids who really, really want to get on the force. Like they're demonstrating the commitment, right? But they're also the kids who, while they're applying for the cadet program, they're applying for the recruit classes. So we've had instances where someone could be in a cadet program, simultaneously applies a recruit class and gets into the academy. And so we lose them on the cadet side because they naturally got in through the academy, right? So that's happened over the years. And what we've tried to do is take those salary savings when that happens and apply it to the next cadet class. So.
But you'd have that information too. They wouldn't be seen
Absolutely.
as a trit, they've been seen as a transfer into the academy program, right? And I assume the fire department has just had one cohort. Is that right? Am I right? Or
so needed legislative approval to have the cadet program created at the fire department. BPD has historical context in terms of the cadet. Actually, former Commissioner Billy Evans was a cadet. Former Commissioner Willie Gross was a cadet. So the cadet program has been in BPD's history, but not the fire department. And so we received legislative approval to get it created. It was budgeted and approved. And so now it's just a matter of implementation. That's something I've spoken with our chief about as a priority for us, that we'd love to see that program get off the ground.
And can I ask, legislative approval, you're talking about the state legislation or city council?
The state. So
okay.
That's filed a home rule, but we had to have that home rule approved at the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can send you the link for that as well.
No, that's, thank you. That was helpful. Robert.
How you doing? Just wanted to, I'm familiar with the cadet program. I think it's an amazing opportunity. I'm glad that it was reconstituted under, believe Commissioner Gross or Evans, probably Evans. And I worked with Paul Johnston, who was actually the original creator of the cadet program. And the original advisor and such for the cadet program back when it started in the late 70s, early 80s. And one of the challenges when they created the legislation or opportunities or challenges when they created the legislation in the cadet program originally was that I believe the commissioner has the authority or ability to appoint up to 1/3 of an academy class with people who've successfully completed the cadet program. Historically, some of the people, I don't know if the representation of people who successfully complete the cadet program and are appointed to the academy always achieve the diversity that it was originally created for. And when we look at over time, since there was a long pause, I think that the cadets probably stopped when I stopped. So probably in the mid 90s, the cadet program stopped for a long period of time. And there were still people who had satisfied that obligation to the department and were not appointed, even though they had no kind of like marks against them, so to speak. So I do think it's important while we're putting out the cadet program as an excellent path as it was originally created, to achieve more diversity and more city kids who graduated from city schools getting on the department. I do think it's important to recognize that has not always been, the achievements wasn't always lined up with the goals. So I just think that it's, if we can start when we'd like looking at the data, since you said there's been 4 classes, so it would take 2-year cycles. It'll take a while before there's a good pool to a point. But I do think it's important to recognize they are it's a political discussion of how much the new police commissioner and the mayor want to appoint cadets. So I just think it's important to put it in context that just because someone completes the 2 years, they may not get on. And if they do get on, there's a kind of a volume issue here.
Yeah,
so I just want to put that in the mix.
Just to that point, I think that's a great point. And so that's actually been a point that's been highlighted to me by a lot of folks at the fire department. How do you guarantee that we're going to achieve the goals we set with this cadet program, right? So one thing I will say is when we worked with BPD, our first directive to them was we're not gonna pick these kids, but we're gonna set some criteria here. And one thing we wanted neighborhood representation, and we wanted we wanted kids who spoke a second language. We looked at the needs of BPD to figure out historically what are some of the groups that are historically left out. And so what we did is, we worked with BPD. Once that list was finalized, we had that sent to the mayor's office, right? And just to make sure that, to your point, we're hitting the goals that we're hitting. And I think that's where the accountability lays, is with the 5th floor, right? Making sure that when these classes do go out, that it's neighborhood kids who are getting the shot, that it's not kids who, we don't want to discredit the kids who are going to get, just because, they might get into the academy. We're not going to let them into the recruit class, but there are some challenges there. One thing I found troublesome during the cadet selection process is, we create these sort of risk assessments for these kids. And so, we could have a kid from Heath Street, no criminal record, no sort of, no running with the law, a straight shooter, but may have, a brother who was gang affiliated or a cousin who's gang affiliated. And so we put these risk assessments on these kids and they're automatically eliminated, right? So those are some of the policies that I start to worry about, right? And I think that's where we can make an impact with BPD. You talk about how many kids, there was an article talking about, the lack of applicants in civil service. And to me, I would attribute that to, I talked to plenty of kids who have just given up. You could have a driving infraction, you're not getting in. So I think we've got to look at the entry point. Why are kids getting bypassed? Oftentimes it feels like we're holding higher standards than the kids who are applying to the department. Well, the kids to higher standards than some of the officers once they get in. So for me, I would love to see that process addressed to figure out, what are the criterias making sure we're not, eliminating it for petty crimes that they committed, in their young days. So I think that's where we can make a lot of progress.
So there are other questions. I know we have to move on. I just have a couple of just last things. We really appreciate your being here with us. Is I wonder if Boston has done anything about what Framingham did, which is get out of the veterans preference and a preference for residents and graduates of Boston schools, and that's something we should recommend to the mayor. And do you know about the 30% by 2030 commitment that Boston has not signed on to? It's 30% women by 2030, and every major city has signed on except us. I think a lot of the urban police departments have, in fact, loosened up on juvenile offenses, sort of second chance for kids. And it sounds like Boston has not. So those are three things that I think would make a huge difference. And I think you're saying the same thing. You're not making these decisions. And I'm not blaming you for it. We'd like to be helpful in any way we can. And you should know my background. I sued police departments and fire departments all over the country for race discrimination. So fire departments are like real tough. And do you know about the report that was done on the fire department 4 or 5 years ago? Do you have a copy of that?
Yeah, it's 2 quick points just because I'm so interested in this conversation. The fire department is less diverse now than when the consent decree was issued, which I think is a great point that folks don't highlight now. And then the second point is Brookline. There was actually an article in the Globe today about the mayor because they're opting out of civil service. And I know a lot of cities and towns around the Commonwealth have done that. And it's an interesting conversation for Boston to have. But, I recall going to the State House to testify for the Cadet Program for the fire department by myself, surrounded by a room of folks that did not want to hear this, right? So that's just my little context there.
So if we can ever be helpful in that regard, call on us. We will surround you. And then the police will surround us and the fire will surround us, but we will surround you and support you.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. And really, anything we can do, we're here, to help. Please remember that. And we appreciate what you're doing. And, this is on our agenda, police and fire department. Fire departments are tough, very tough. So anyway, thank you for being here. Come and visit us again. Okay.
All right, thank you, Donnie. I certainly learned a lot that I didn't know, so I appreciate your thoughtful remarks on this. And to be honest, I'm not sure we want to dive into perhaps a little bit of the letter, but I think at least some of the things I heard from him, we're not asking the letter as is now. I can tell you that much in terms of the policy, of criteria perhaps of how cadets get in, the attrition rates, and some of those things are not currently in the letter. So, I think what we can do, if that works, Madam Chair, and Barbara, Commissioner, I certainly want to hear from you, your personal experience on this, so shoot me, perhaps folks can shoot me an email with what else to add to the letter. But I just based on what I heard from Donnie, there's a lot that I think we can at least try to attempt to put in here before we send it. So that's my suggestion, but happy to have further conversation about the letter specifically if folks want to engage in that space. If not, we can move on. And Will is here as well. Move on to the next issue, which is initiative, which is housing discrimination. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. And before I move on to Will, as I mentioned briefly, I did have an hour conversation with Executive Director Stephanie Everett, who's an attorney and a new hire, if you will, who's leading the OPED office. She made it, gave me some updates that really gave me a sense that things are progressing significantly in her office. She's hired a total of 9 people right now. including 2 investigators, and plan to hire 2 more intake persons. She has a deputy director, chief of staff, and some other admins. They've been taking complaints already since October, I believe. And another thing that she mentioned that I thought was useful, and we'll circle back on that. She said she has a regular meeting with BPD regarding, updates to the policy, right? Which, I think we talked about diversity, and so, the diversity committee, or that they're supposed to start, which they did already, by the way. And she said she'll invite me to those meetings. So I think that'll be an avenue for me to sort of keep tabs on what's going on, and report to the commission. And finally, she did say that she'd be willing to come and talk to the commission and give more in-depth status about, the work that she's doing. The other couple of things that's also happening is the civilian review board, which it looks like, it's in its final stages of nominations, 9 people in that board, and then 5 people on the other board relating to the internal investigation. So if again, another thing that I want to put it to you all is, if you want me to invite her to come talk to us next meeting or the meeting after, certainly she's up to it. So I'll close in that space for now. But I'm here to answer any further questions. I'll go ahead. Did you want to say?
This is the woman who's been there a year.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, she started, I think, in the summer of last year.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
spring of last year,
Yes. And so yes, but she's built the staff, and apparently she's got a space in mind. So I think, from what I at least heard from her, things are progressing very steadily in terms of what she's doing. So again, going to the next topic, I see my friend Will here. Looks like he's driving and probably going somewhere. So I'll introduce him briefly. And he's no stranger to us, since you met him last time. He's the executive director of the Fair Housing Commission and the Office of Fair Housing. Last meeting, I did give you a brief update in terms of what's going on there. But I thought, my next update was going to have a meeting with them in Suffolk University and so on. But I thought perhaps to best bring him on for a few minutes as well, give his update, and maybe, answer some questions and figure out some next steps for how the commission can partner with them in the work that they're doing. So without further ado, again, I'll introduce Will Onoha. Thank you, Will.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, Director Cavallo, and good evening to all the commissioners, and also good evening to Director or Chief Donnie Tavares. I was listening to the work you guys have been doing so far, and I mean, it's really amazing, really good work, and something to be very proud of, especially at this time in our city or in our country, where there's a lot of changing or moving things that are changing, especially when we talk about diversity and police reform and so forth. So that was very, very interesting and encouraging stuff. And anything I could do to help you guys out with that, please let me know. So my name is Will Onoha. I am the Executive Director of the Office of Fair Housing and Equity. It is a pleasure to be here with you. As I've said before, our organizations are brother and sister organizations. We are just different sides of the same coin when it comes to the Human Rights Commission. And one of the things we've been working on primarily for the last year and a half is really desegregating Boston. And how we do that is through a lot of, one, independent investigations we do into housing discrimination, and 2, through a very more proactive approach where we have contracted Suffolk University to do testing for us, and they do housing discrimination testing, and the results of those tests are turned over to us, which then turns into what is called a commission-initiated complaint, which your organization also has the same ability to do with different things. And how we've been doing that is, to date, we've have over 100 tests that Suffolk School of Law has turned over to us, and have all turned into commission-initiated complaints against several developers and landlords throughout the city of Boston. We have had a heavy focus on areas that are very unsegregated, to say the least. For example, the Seaport, West Roxbury, Charlestown, and other areas of the city of Boston or neighborhoods that are predominantly white, and what we have found, which has been no secret to us, is that there is a lot of discrimination that is happening to people of color, throughout the city of Boston. And now this isn't news to anyone, but rather what has happened is we are now taking a very more proactive approach to really desegregate Boston. And also as part of President Biden's mandate, which the city of Boston has met, to do what is something you guys might have heard about within the last year called affirmatively furthering fair housing, which has now been added to the city of Boston zoning code, which is a tool that the city is now requiring developers to use when they do development, to make sure that neighborhoods are more diverse and that they are taking a very meaningful and active approach and lens while they're doing development, to make sure that it is equitable across the board. A lot of the work we have done has been very enforcement heavy. All the individuals to date that we have investigated have all started with a $10,000 fine and up, for all of them who have had cases where we did find housing discrimination was taking place. And this has been the focus of our work like I said, for the last year and a half. It has proven to be very fruitful. It has proven to be very effective. There's a lot more work to be done. But one of the things that has been happening is we have also been able, through the work we've done, be able to connect with the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. Why them? Because that's a board that's extremely powerful, extremely political. And one of the things, if we're going to fight housing discrimination, that needs to happen, is we have to have partners beyond the city. It takes the real estate boards and other organizations that do deal with housing to partner with us in order to make it real. And so we have been able to push legislation over the last year that's still at the State House, but we have kind of got an early jump on it, or an early head start, if you will, by training all real estate brokers who are members of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. One of the requirements for them is making sure that as they renew their licenses, that they have at least 2 to 4 hours of fair housing training, which we have contracted the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, and we do the training for them, which has proven to be a very, very useful relationship. Last fiscal year, I'm going to call it, because I know we have the calendar year in the fiscal year, but last fiscal year, we were able to train about 400 different realtors before we got to January of this year, and give them fair housing training through the Greater Boston Real Estate Board and through their membership. A lot of our cases obviously are private because they're ongoing investigations, and I'm sure at a later time, when we're not being recorded, I can go into deep details about a lot of the things we do. So it'll be news, or it'll be at least held private between the commissioners that are here. Executive Director Cavallo will be attending our next meeting with Suffolk School of Law, because we would love to see how the Human Rights Commission can also get involved as a partner in the work we're doing. Reason being is that you guys have one of the most powerful, in fact, I believe you have the most powerful ordinance in the city of Boston. And so you have the ability to do things that other organizations or other city departments cannot do. And that means you can also offer additional sanctions to perpetrators or landlords or developers who are found to be in violation, or who are found to engage in discriminatory practices. It's something I've been talking to Director Cavallo about. I know he's excited about it. I know you guys have a lot on your agenda, but because this is something that is near and dear to not only my heart, but to the work that we're trying to do in the city of Boston, I do believe there's a lot of room for the Human Rights Commission to currently get involved and, assist us with. And as a sister agency, help us with this work that we're currently doing. Discrimination obviously is a big thing, and it's not something that can be done by one organization. It takes all of us. And so that's just what we've been doing in a nutshell. And I don't want to be too long-winded, but would like to open it up to questions in case you have any, where I can explain further or talk to you about anything you might be interested in terms of the work that we've been doing. It's really a pleasure to be back here and to be able to speak to the commissioners, because I know you guys have had a lot to do over the last year, but I'm looking forward in this year to really partner with the Human Rights Commission and take our work to the next level.
Great. Thank you, Will. Great to see you again, and thank you for the update. That's very helpful. So let's open this to questions. Questions, comments? So, Reyes, anybody?
Yeah, I want to thank you for this presentation and reassure you that we are absolutely willing to work with you, and that fair housing is one of our priorities, and discrimination in any form is our single objective. So if there are concrete programs or actions that you think that this commission should start doing right away, it would be great if you could present them to the director and the chairwoman. And I imagine it would take then a vote, a small presentation and a vote by the commission, and then we would move forward. Count on us.
Yeah. So we will, as you know, and Reyes says, this has been one of the things on our list. Is obviously housing is one of the things that I don't know who in Boston does not talk about housing, affordable housing, housing discrimination. And in Boston, we all know, I think, stories that are shocking in today that still go on, that are blatant, hard to believe, but really blatant discrimination on race, on vouchers.
Yes.
And I guess from the beginning, I think we've all been very interested and convinced that what we would like to do is see a couple of these landlords, realtors, who have a pattern and practice of discrimination that we can highlight. And, we have the wherewithal now with research and statistics. So as you come across, are there 2 or 3 real, developers or landlords, larger landlords that we don't have to discuss it publicly now, but in fact, we don't want to discuss it publicly now, but as you and Evandro talk, are there folks who continually violate the law in terms of discriminating against various classes of people that we are here to protect? And as you come across those folks, please bring them to us, and we will work with you to look back in history in terms of the way we do pattern and practice cases, complaints, in terms of looking at data and statistics to build a history in a case, in a complaint, which is what we would like to. Instead of doing an individual case, we would take a landlord, a realtor, a developer, and build a class action, build a case of and use that as an example. And I think people, when they see an individual case, they go, well, it's a one-off, but these are not one-offs. These are, constant and sometimes ideologically in a, I don't have to tell you, so we look forward to working with you hand in hand to find a couple of these when you're ready with your advice to go forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for saying that. In fact, that's one of the things I wanted to really implore your commission about this evening, because we do a very deep dive investigation. So we have lots of these folks who have a history and a pattern of doing this. So I guess my question to you, or what I would like the Human Rights Commission to consider, is if you could join us in sanctions. And what I mean by that is you wouldn't need to do an extra investigation unless you wanted to, because we already do the work but you know, where we have a well-proven case of both discrimination and a pattern of discrimination, you know, it is within your ordinance and your power to also add additional sanctions as you see fit, you know, to these perpetrators. And you know, Madam Chair, you know better than anyone else that for a lot of these folks, you get their attention by hitting them in the pocket, right? You know, this is the reason why our fines start at $10,000 and then go up. And then obviously there's compensatory damages and civil damages and all that kind of stuff that can be added. But you too, as a commission, have, as I said, and as I've read your ordinance, you know, I still believe the most powerful ordinance in the city, because you can cut across anything, police, fire, education, anything, you know, and us attacking it from a fair housing standpoint, and then you attacking it from a human rights standpoint, I think gives it a 1-2 punch. And, you know, again, I know the commission is busy, and I'm sure a lot of folks are going to come to you with a lot of things, because truly, really and truly, you have that ability to cut across many different issues. But this is a well-oiled machine. There are things I would love to speak with you and the commission about, obviously privately, because there are things that I cannot say publicly. Some things are still ongoing in their investigations, but what I can tell you is, once I present them to Director Cavallo and he presents it to you, if you like it in that fashion, the evidence is beyond damning, you know, and some of it is really disheartening. But nevertheless, again, I see you guys as a very powerful organization that can do things and can make a splash that I don't think any other city department can do. You know, so I'm super excited and eager to work with the commission this year, share all of the same information we have, and even see perhaps other measures you might be able to take to employ sanctions. And I'm not sure if the commission has talked about that yet, but I know you certainly have the power to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to working with you. And Anne, I think you wanted to join here.
I just wanted to thank you. I was gonna sort of in that same line. I know that from my work at Metro Housing, we used to train people that violated and needed training, and then some. I'm really interested in the patent and the repeat offenders who have been trained, and then how do we really make them pay, so to speak, for repeated offenses. And I'm happy to join Evandro to meet with you if time allows, or if commissioners are invited to do that, because this is something that's also very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, and Anne, you know, having Anne involved is very helpful. You know, some of us bring different backgrounds. I mean, me with the police and the fire department, Anne and Anne definitely with housing is deep knowledge. You know, we can support the staff and what they do with different kind of expertise and background. So, you know, we're ready to see 2 or 3 of those pattern and practice cases. So let's move forward, because I can't think of anything that we hear more about than housing in this city, you know.
Yes.
So thank you, Will, for all you do and for joining us again. And we hope we hear from you, you know, and we look forward to working with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being so gracious to me, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, Evandro.
Like sorry, I was speaking, but I was on mute. Just certainly want to thank Will for his partnership and the update, and looking forward to work with them as well. And I guess at this point, I was thinking perhaps, Madam Chair, we can go into the digital divide letter as well as the update in that space. And I actually just pulled up the letter. I could sort of summarize it briefly, but you know, the information we're looking for again primarily came from, you know, the Talia's report in terms of the gaps. And I will give certainly credit to Roy in this space where, you know, he sort of broke it down into the zip codes. He found those zip codes himself. So certainly he's worked closely with me in both letters actually that we've discussed so far, but happy to pass the buck to you to discuss some of the updates. And again, we can talk more about the letter and certainly want to engage Talia as well in terms of, you know, what the letter looks like. Is there something that you'd like to add? And to be honest, I've asked, we're hopefully going to meet with the UMass sort of team next week as well to talk about next steps in both this project as well as the DPD projects. Right.
So a couple of things on the letter. I also have a couple of suggestions coming from Tech Goes Home folks that we might want to add to the letter, but I won't have them till tomorrow.
Okay. And I see Marvin Vinay is here. Marvin is one of the staff at Tech Goes Home. So just wanted to flag that as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
great.
I think he presented to us, you know, last year.
Right. So I sent it to, anyway, we may have some comments from them tomorrow.
Okay.
The one thing I wanted to bring up was, you know, we have almost $50 billion coming down from the feds for broadband. And that money was dedicated to unserved and underserved populations until January 7th. On January 7th, which I'm sure none of you have heard about, on January 7th, in final rulemaking, which is what happens after legislation, you go through a rulemaking process, which is really regulations following legislation. On January 7th, the last day of the rulemaking, all the interim rulemaking had that language in it. They abandoned those two words, unserved and underserved, and broadened it so that this money is going to the states. And now the language says a proven need.
So
the states, so the states can accept proposals from anybody who has a project that has a proven need. And it started with 25 megabytes, it's now 100. So it really was concentrated on Black, brown, poverty in rural areas, and now has really broadened. And so what I will say is that going forward, this is really going to be a real look at what states are doing. So what Massachusetts is doing and what the city needs to look at in terms of what Massachusetts is doing, because this is like once in a lifetime opportunity to make a difference in the digital divide. And it's slipping away because the concentrated effort to make a difference in the digital divide has now gotten broadened and opened up. So it's very disappointing. And what's also disappointing is you haven't seen a thing on television, the newspaper, about what's happened on January 7th. Like, you know, who cares, right? So, I mean, that was a big thing that went from people who didn't have internet or were underserved to like anybody who has a need for better quality broadband. Could be everybody. I could use better quality broadband, right? Who couldn't use better quality broadband, right? So it's very disappointing. And now is the burden on all of us to ensure that this 50 billion, B with the B, gets spent to really impact this digital divide. So actually, I ended up talking to the mayor today and told her about this, how disappointing it was, and what this is going to mean in the state unless we pay attention to it. For particularly urban districts like ours, you know, the Springfields and the Bostons and the Lowells, as well as rural areas out in Western Mass. I mean, you can go far enough in Western Mass, you don't get any broadband. You know, you have to drive and stand on a hill, you know, even for cell service or broadband, whatever. So anyway, that was sort of my update, unfortunate update. So so the letter, I think, is fine. We may add a little to it, but that's sort of where we are. I think the second thing I want to say is, after we finish this letter, I think we ought to be, we think, Talia, Roy, we're to think about together, are there things that the city could do now? We talked about this once. The city could do now, right now, under executive order, that would impact the digital divide. Are there things that we could do right now? That the mayor could do? So, you know, maybe we could huddle and see, put our heads together and maybe ask Theo and others to gather with us to see if people from the tech goes home, and maybe Ann Schweiger, who's in the administration now, as well, just to have an informal conversation about other things that we could think of, you know, that would make a difference. Because certainly it's one of the things the mayor has been interested in for a long time. So let's see if we can help her and think about things that the city might be able to do now. So I would put that on our agenda to maybe gather a group of us and outsiders to sort of, you know, a couple of us, a couple of outsiders to sort of think together about other things that we could do now. Okay, so that's broadband, right?
I have a question about the letters. Would it make any sense to give a deadline?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, right.
And the deadline I was thinking about, I didn't put that in there, but it was essentially, I was gonna give them 30 days, which depending on, you know, maybe short, maybe too long, but, you know, I figured that by the next meeting, right, if you will. And, you know, obviously depending on when we're able to finalize this thing, you know, it could be for next meeting or it could be the next meeting after that.
Yeah, no more than 30 days.
Right, yeah, 30 days. And that was the same thing for BPD as well. You know, the letter was gonna be for 30 days.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the second? The second letter is,
So the second letter was the BPD letter. And then the third letter is the letter that Commissioner Ann suggested that we send to the Judiciary Committee on Beacon Hill to support essentially the overhaul of the, you know, hate crime statutes in the state. And I'm sure I welcome certainly Ann to add more, but, you know, from what I saw, I actually was somewhat familiar with it. This is something that the Attorney General had been pushing as part of our big package of policy. Essentially, you know, there's barriers within the laws that prevent people from reporting. And, you know, so the letter specifies the statute, or at least the bills numbers that are associated with this sort of overall, and asking them to support and essentially vote out of committee, right? These letters are not unusual, certainly for, you know, for legislatures to get them. And I think, you know, in our space as Human Rights Commission, albeit obviously this is not necessarily in one of the initiatives, we could say it could be related to the AAPI hate incidents increase that we worked on and continue to work on. It's certainly related to the work that we're doing. So, you know, I just wanted to bring it before the commission. One, have an input from you all, but two, have a vote to send it up to Beacon Hill. More
I
important.
think it's an excellent idea. Excellent idea. I fully support it.
Thank you.
I do too. I had one question, and
Sure.
it may be just which was protected classes to include immigration status, gender expression, and sex. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
And sex? Gender-
Maybe there's a slight typo there as I'm reading it. Maybe there's something missing that's not. That's not.
Well, there's a comma missing after gender expression, but
Yes, I think that's
Okay.
what it is.
All right,
But I'll take a closer look at it. I'm glad
Yeah,
you brought that up.
And the
Yeah.
other thing, Evandro, is just in the broadband one, there was no task force recommendation, I don't think. I think that's just
I'm sorry.
I think in the broadband letter, it says there was a task force recommendation. I think that just got carried over from the police letter.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for
That's what
pointing that out too. Yes, I see it now.
That's all. Yeah. Okay, so where are we now?
So I think, we just addressed, and do I hear a vote, unanimous votes to send a letter once we, to just kind of confirm that, I think there's something that we should vote on. And I'm seeing yeses, but just kind of want to clarify that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I second that.
yeah. All those in favor?
yes.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, so we
Okay.
have confirmed our vote from the last meeting where we voted to send the broadband letter and the police letter. And now we have voted to send the letter to the legislator on this legislation.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
So a couple more things, and I'm keeping sort of tabs on time. Obviously, the discussion's been very productive, but just want to be aware of it. A couple more initiatives to update on. One, I see that Lee unfortunately is unable to join us, but and I know this is near and dear to his heart. Into the commission, particularly the Black Men and Boys Initiative that we've been pursuing over the past year or so. As you know, most recently the city has created a commission specifically focused on Black men and boys. It's called the Black Men and Boys Commission to focus on issues relating to, the advance of Black men and boys in the city. And in fact, a new director was appointed to serve in that capacity. And I believe actually, I think this is public, so don't quote me on this, but I think this new commission.
Well, it is now. If it's going to be Evandro public in 1 minute.
No, right. So it is now, but so this new commission is going to be part of the equity cabinet, right? So, and the new director is somebody that is a good friend of mine. And we've already spoken for about 30 minutes about some of the work that we're doing. I'm looking forward to sort of partner with them in that space. And to be honest, again, I know Lee is very passionate about this work. I just didn't, common sense to me at least felt that, let's sort of help them get off the ground. Let's figure out how to partner with them instead of getting ahead of them, if you will, since they're dedicated to this issue. So that's where it's at in terms of, I met with the guy and we will follow up very soon. I think he started 2 weeks ago, a week ago. So I'm just kind of giving him time to settle down and get his office, and we're going to try to brainstorm some further steps in this space. So that's the update I had on the Black Men and Boys Initiative. Then that leads the other one that I think actually, and again, sometimes we bring these two issues at the same time, and I don't want it to make it seem like it's a competition, but I do think that, there's some work that we can sort of do right away in the space, the AAPI hate initiative that, that we did particularly over the spring and summer. If you remember correctly, we had a listening session with Mayor Kim Janey then that talked, that had, employees from City Hall to meet with the mayor to talk about how they were feeling. And as I'm sure saw this past weekend, an horrific thing happened in New York where an Asian woman was pushed in the train tracks in New York. And in fact, Mayor Wu tweeted about it. So I think, Susan and I, in fact, met with or talked with some of the folks that we had been partnering with in this space. And I think there's some work to be done here. So I would sort of want to update the commission to say that, we're going to try to move forward with this while we work with the new Black Men and Boys Initiative and coming up with the plan together with them and how we tackle that issue. So that's the update in that space. So any questions, any thoughts in either one?
No, I just think it would be interesting to see what the commission on Black Men and Boys is. What is their goal? What is their mission?
So
You know-
there, I've actually, good question. I've looked at the ordinance, and it's very specific in a sense. And I forget how many members, what the board member will look like, if you will, how many people will be involved. But to be honest, actually, our commission, and I think it's actually misspelled, not misspelled, but they mentioned the Civil Rights Commission in it. We're supposed to work hand in hand with them. But their job, I think it's sort of, I don't want to call it advisory board, but it's sort of, there to help, highlight the issues that affect Black men and boys, and to advise the mayor on those issues and so on. So, but, I've just kind of taken a brief look at it, but obviously this is the job of the new ED, and hopefully, we'll start getting a better sense of what it will be doing. But we anticipate, again, we are written in the in the ordinance, so we anticipate sort of having a robust partnership with them as they get off the ground.
Yeah, well, they were created by the city council, I know, and they have some role in appointing, but I'm wondering, they'll be curious as to what it is they hope to accomplish. Or is it just advising the mayor on these issues? Is there anything else? As you go along, it'll be interesting to see,
Yeah.
where it's going,
I mean, I sort of, when I think of that commission, if you will, though it's called commission, I sort of think of it more or less, and this is just me spitballing, like what the immigrant advancement does, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of just advanced, like literally advanced, the needs and and issues of Black men and boys in the city, right? And what that could look like, and actually even Mayor Moya has an advisory committee too that they work with. So I think of it kind of, again, same thing as we have the women's advancement, right? It's to sort of, there'll be liberty to sort of create new initiatives, partner with outside organizations. That's how I sort of envision it. And actually, I was not heavily involved, but I attended some of the ceremony, at least, with the city council. I know Julia, city council at large, Julia Meher, sort of spearheaded this, and actually,
Yeah,
even
she
through
did.
her own mouth,
Yeah.
Tito Jackson, former city council, was the one that first filed it years ago. So there's some history there. But I just look at it as an office to advance the needs and the issues of Black men and boys in the city. And it's up to them sort of come up with what the initiatives and what the concerns are. I would think certainly, there'll be discussions of education, there'll be discussions of certainly about housing. I mean,
It's
jobs, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think there's certainly, obviously, the city council saw a need in it, and the mayor, by appointing the person so early, I think it says that's a priority for the mayor as well.
Yeah, because, in the Office of Neighborhood Services, there's also a liaison for the African-American community. And a
There is?
liaison for, yes. Well, just like there was a liaison for the LGBTQ community, but they
Correct.
all have other jobs, like
Correct.
the liaison for LGBTQ community was also the liaison for Dorchester.
Right.
The liaison for the African-American community also is a liaison for someplace, I don't know. They all had, a part of the city and, something else. So,
Okay.
there's a lot in City Hall. If you got everybody who was involved in the issues of LGBTQ or women or, Black men, or, you would have to gather from a lot of different places. And if they all work together, they'd probably get a lot done. And, as the new mayor comes in and starts appointing people and moving things around, it's probably one of the things that might happen, because as you do that, coordination becomes possible, new things. And then maybe you start seeing where things are and then bringing them together, hopefully.
Yeah.
Because it is never mind in the departments, right?
Yeah.
For sure. but even in the cabinets in City Hall, they're in different places, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else?
I will, Madam Chair, I mean, obviously, I think the next budget, the next item is the
Oh,
budget. And
Yeah.
I'll give you a brief sort of status on that, but I think, I think there was one thing that I wanted to mention in this topic as we move on. I think there is an African liaison, but not sort of African American, right? To sort of focus on African issues. That's at least my understanding of it. I didn't know there was a liaison for African Americans, right? Which the term as used, whether it's African American or Africans, they tend to sort of mean different
Oh,
segment
yeah,
of the
totally mean
population.
different things, yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to put that caveat in there, but I think that the overall sentiment in terms of the various what you mentioned, I think still applies. But I wanted to just kind of make that
Yeah.
slight change. But okay, so budget, and I'll be brief in that as well, in a sense that really the budget discussion is just starting. And I typically have a more in-depth discussion with you all in terms of what the budget is, in the sense that at the end, towards the end, when we get allocation of what the budget will be for us. But I would say that last week, essentially, we submitted a budget request to the Office of Budget in the city. And it really, the budget for FY23, right? We're in FY22 now, and we have another 6 months in that. And FY23 begins, as you know, July 1st. And our budget request was essentially, so-called maintenance budget. Nothing necessarily alarming or new to requests. And 75% of our budget, which essentially it's upwards of $700,000 now in terms of where the overall budget is, and 75% of that essentially goes to pay staff. And as you know, we have, thankfully, now we have 5 full-time employees, and we do have a 6th role that's currently vacant, and that's the EA role or executive assistant role that Susan had. I think we sort of haven't discussed it, but I haven't closed that position out. So that's in there as well. And as far as the non-personnel budget, again, 75% of the budget request is personnel. The non-personnel budget, similar to last year or this year, current fiscal year's budget. And we have, I requested a continued allocation of about $100,000 for in what we currently have, which to do anti-discrimination support and work. And so that's another request. I also requested $30,000 to help us cover the costs of the amazing, I see them in the meeting with us today, the interns that we keep having on the 2 at a time. That helps us keep $30,000 for fiscal year FY23 to cover those costs, and a couple other things, including actually $5,000 for a case management program, which the city currently already uses, called Timeshare, just to help us sort of track our cases, as they come in, and they have, to be honest, been increasing. And I think as we get out there more and more, we'll see increase of cases. And as I talked to the investigator, I think, this it's called Time Matters, that the law department currently uses. It's not very expensive. In fact, the Fair Housing uses a much more robust, expensive one. That's in there as well, hopefully for us to get that program to sort of keep updates on cases. And that's more or less what I had. Happy to answer questions about the budget, but the next steps are that, as I'm sure you all know this already, we're going to have a meeting with the Office of Budget Management. That is not obviously not just the Human Rights Commission, but all of the various agencies and departments, and that's part of the city. And that's going to happen between now and perhaps March, and by April, in the months of April, we'll go testify. April and May, we'll go testify before the City Council, and then in June, I'll skip a step where the mayor submits the budget to the City Council, and then there's a final vote in June. That's essentially what anticipate happening, and certainly will keep you abreast in terms of the status of it all. And we'll give you an update in terms of the final allocation. But our budget, as far as I can see, it's pretty much more or less designed to be what FY22 has been.
So I would suggest that we discuss this at the next meeting. I would suggest you
Okay.
send out the budget to the commissioners.
Okay.
Discuss something we haven't seen, but I would suggest you send it out. And also, this is the kind of thing that the commission should get involved in terms of, should we be asking for other things? This is the question is, what are the priorities for the commission for the next 12 months? And what do we need to meet those priorities? So do we need, what do we need to make that happen? If we're going to take on a major housing case, who's going to do that? What kind of skills do people need, and who's going to do that? So when we talk about these things, we talk about, the police or the fire department, we talk about a housing case, who has the skills in the staff to do those things? And so we don't, at the moment, we don't have anybody doing communications, outreach, or education. I don't know what we're going to do about that. So, I mean, I think we at least ought to have a discussion in terms of some of the robust things we're talking about, how we're going to do them. And I think you ought to think about how we're going to do them, because we're talking aspirationally here. But as you look at the staff and the staff skill set, does it match what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that, particularly as it relates to investigations, whether it's housing or others, it looks like, particularly with BPD, for instance, a lot of it will be data-driven information and research and analysis of it. We have someone on the team to do that. And certainly, the skills that Amber brings to the table, along with my skills, and certainly can lean on you and others to sort of, and certainly the, Will and his team, as he indicated earlier, I think we can do those investigations. Another item that I failed to, obviously failed to mention as well, is that we have a little bit of money for consultants as well. If we need to bring on people, as we do now, to bring on people to help us understand particular whether it's more housing, data and things like that. But I'm confident that the staff that we have now, at least is sort of is enough to get started. I mean, it's difficult to make the prediction of the future when it's sort of like we haven't been doing it, right? So it's hard to kind of say, okay, I think we need A, B, C, D, E, but I think we have enough to get started in most of these, perhaps issues and investigations that we may embark on. But that's not to say that we don't need more. And to some extent, that's how we sort of build the budget for next year, right? If we had done a couple of these housing pattern investigations, and certainly, and you and everybody could see some weak points that we need to build capacity. So then it's sort of like, okay, let's look at perhaps add another investigator, or do we need to sort of train certainly Amber to go to training for this thing or that thing which exists. So I think the staff, that we have, the skill set that we have at the table right now, it's enough to get us going, if you will. But I do understand your concern in terms of budget and how we should think about our needs going forward.
So, I don't know Amber's skill set, but she's an investigator. And I don't know whether she knows how to investigate pattern and practice cases, which is what we're talking about. But I think I would just suggest you might want to spend a little more time matching who we have. And that's no reflection on who we have. And their
I understand.
It's a reflection on aspirational what we want to do. And this would be the time to ask. So let's just think about that and see as we go forward whether or not it makes sense this would be the time. Because we had talked about when we hired Roy,
Mhm.
actually, there was another candidate at the time that Reyes and Lee and I interviewed, who we really liked, who brought a very different set of skills, but we thought had a more policy-oriented view, but with an analytical background. So anyway, I think you ought to think about it in terms of discussion we had today, in terms of
Oh, I will.
housing and the police and the fire department.
Mm.
You know, and also to recognize the work that's been done up to now has been done by, in terms of analysis, statistics, and writing, has been done by interns and Reyes and me, and not the staff. So, you know, and we're switching over now that we have 5 people to use them, and we don't know what people are capable, and that's not saying they're not capable. I just think you need to spend some time matching the skill set to the aspirations, that's all. And come back to us with your recommendations, that's all. So we can do what we think we want to do. So give you a chance to think about that, because this would be the time. All right, so next steps, let's, you know, we said we wanted to do, maybe Annie might, I think she offered herself up. Terrible thing to do, Annie. Offered herself up that she might join you in a meeting with Will. She has such a great deep background in housing. That would be great, I think. I think we talked about maybe we could do a meeting on, is there something the city could do more immediate meeting in the near term on broadband, and maybe we could bring together somebody from Tech Goes Home, and Ann Swiger, and Talia, and Reyes, and me, and whoever, Roy, whoever, Evandro, whoever from the staff, to talk about what that might look like. I think that would be a great opportunity to do that. So Evandro, or whoever, you know, whoever you and Roy, or whoever, and Ann and Theo and Talia and Reyes and I mean, and whoever else you think should be involved. I think that would be a great sort of, just an opportunity to throw some ideas around. So why don't we sort of leave it to you to try to figure that out. Any other next steps that we need here, guys?
I have, without wanting to put my friend Robert on the spot, I was wondering if he could help a little bit with the cadet pilot program.
Yeah.
You have such good background, and Lilo has tried to approach things, but there is no information whatsoever. So I think that would be important if you could
I
help
wouldn't
that
know if
way.
there's no information. The question is if it's accessible.
Right.
There is
I'm sure there's
information somewhere.
information, right?
But you
Yeah.
have the background
Yeah.
information,
I'm
which
open to talking to you. Yep.
we couldn't find. And the other question that this is just for me, I would be interested in seeing data regarding the intake forms that we are receiving by categories. Of course, you cannot identify the people, but as the months go by, what kind of requests or claims of discrimination are we receiving in housing and
Yeah.
in
That's
all categories?
Yeah, I was thinking we could do that quarterly, at the end of each quarter, to look back and say what we've been doing up to, and we obviously collecting that information now, and again, hopefully in the future when we get the new database, it'll be even more helpful to sort of track everything. But we certainly in the last week or two, even before that, there's been a steady stream, and I think it's going to increase as we go.
I think that also the idea that Roy had of using zip codes would be very important in this case. Where are they coming from?
Right. All right, so Robert, you've agreed to talk to Lilo. I think that'd be very helpful. Obviously, you've got deep knowledge in that none of the rest of us have. So might as well use the expertise we have sitting around this virtual table here. Okay. All right, we all have jobs.
Next meeting, I think, and what we agreed upon last time.
The third
Actually,
Thursday.
we go into public comments now and then talk
Yeah,
about.
Yeah, members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions, provide public comment. To do so, please raise your hand or type your question in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press 9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at susanhemley@boston.gov. So while we're waiting here, Evandro, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was thinking we could, figure out the time, the meeting time as well. Whether I just wanted to have it, again, kind of run it through the commissioners, whether the, excuse me, the second, I believe actually third Thursday of
Thursday.
the month, whether
And,
that worked.
I think we said it's fine. What I had suggested to you was that you look at the third Thursday to make sure we're not running into some big something on that third Thursday. As you know, but let's just assume that the next meeting is the third Thursday and assume we are
Excuse me.
the third Thursdays. And if there's something that you see, Evandro, in terms of third Thursday coming up for the next 6 months or whatever it is through June, let us know. Okay. So do we have anything in the chat or anybody, Susan, who has emailed you?
I do not. There are no public comments.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second. All
Second.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The meeting is adjourned at 6:29. How efficient are we? All right, folks.
All right,
Meeting.
have a good one.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
one. All right.
Thank you,
thanks
everybody, for the hard work.
meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for your comments and your expertise. Really appreciate it. Okay, guys, thanks. Bye-bye.
Happy
Bye-bye.
happy